The flat field that's bordered by Bourne Brook and bisected by Richfield Road in Manchester is one of those spots that tends to flood when there's heavy rainfall or major storms, such as Tropical Storm Irene or the rain that fell on July 9th and 10th this past summer. By and large, Manchester escaped the worst of the flooding that impacted other neighboring towns like Londonderry or Weston, but not all of the town was left unscathed. An effort is underway at Bourne Brook to build some resiliency for the neighborhood that sits to the east of Richville Road and west of the Bourne Brook, known as the Green Mountain Estates, where housing was constructed in the 1970s and 80s and is now home to several dozen families. Flooding has occurred there 3 times over the past decade. Dredging of the stream bed is one feature, and so is an effort to tighten up homes to limit floodwaters from seeping into basements. Don Penji, one of the residents on Green Mountain Road in the neighborhood off Richfield Road, described what was going on. Why is it when you have a heavy rainstorm like we had back in July or back in 2011 with Irene, this area tends to get flooded out?
Over the years, the sediment has grown here and the stream bottom has gotten higher. So as the water pressure gets backed up, it ends up pushing against the bank on the south side and overflowing there. It's washed away 2 or 3 feet. So the object now is to dig this sediment down lower, dig the stream bed lower to where it used to be, and then try to get more large stones along the bank to keep it from washing away. So the state has given the town a grant and a permit to work on this. They're going to work all the way back to the mattress factory property and shore up the banks along there. And as well, they have a permit to do ongoing yearly maintenance to keep it from overflowing again. So each year they will dig it out and keep the level of the river from overflowing. With the climate change and with some of the work that was done unfortunately on Route 7, it has changed the flow of the river and it ends up being here. We've been in this house for 35 years, and the first 25 years we never had a flood. In the last 12, we've had 3 or 4. So obviously things have changed and it's getting worse. We hope this will, help keep it to a minimum.
But that's only part of it. A federal program that would fund upgrades to homes that would reduce flooding and which would pay 75% of those homeowners' costs is being worked on between the residents of the neighborhood, the nonprofit Stratton Foundation, and the town government, as State Representative Seth Bongartz, who is also involved in the effort, told us.
Interestingly, I think the solution to this is actually not going to come from government in this instance. Well, yes, it is in part, but let me get to that. The Stratton Foundation, which is a nonprofit, it's kind of like a nonprofit community foundation that serves the mountain towns and also serves down into the valley. They've done a lot of work down here in Manchester and Dorset and Burton and others. Recognized that what happened to these houses here, we're on Green Mountain Drive, and that the fact that they flooded 3 times in the last 12 years, it's going to happen again, and it's going to happen again. And so rather than just do small grants to people to help them, give them $500 toward a new furnace or whatever it is, when they called me, they said, is there any way, or can you think of anything, or can we work together to figure out a way to do something more permanent, that they're really going to help these people in the long run, rather than just little bits here and drips and jabs here, then it happens again, and then we do it again. And so it's complicated, and there's a lot to it, but the idea is to help people figure out a way to at least get their furnaces, get their hot water heaters, their wiring out of the cellars, so that the next time it happens, maybe all they really have to deal with is pumping the cellar and demolding, rather than needing a new furnace, needing a new hot water heater, having their power shut off, depending on how severe it gets, because their wiring got wet. Get that all out of the cellar. And so we're trying, and so the thing that makes this potentially doable beyond the Stratton Foundation really putting in some upfront money to help make it happen is that the federal government has 75% money available to help people flood-proof, waterproof their houses. The other thing, by the way, I didn't mention is doing things like, those little windows that you see in cellars when they stick up a couple feet, flood-proofing those, flood-proofing Bilco doors, doing sort of the stuff that will help the next time be, only as, I'm making all this up of course, but a quarter as bad as it was this time. By getting those things out of there in the first instance and just making the fix a lot simpler the next time. So Stratton Foundation is putting in some money to help with the upfront costs to get us to the point of being able to put those applications together. We're meeting on November 1st at 5 o'clock at the town office for all the residents here and all the right team of people, from the Rivers people to the town manager and others and the Stratton Foundation, to gauge interest and then figure out how to allocate and utilize the money that the Stratton Foundation has set aside to help the people who live here on Green Mountain Drive.
Meanwhile, Green Mountain Estates also got some good news at the Manchester Select Board meeting on October 17th, where a long legal standoff stretching back to 2005 over the maintenance of the roads and the water system between the heirs of the original owners of the development and the town of Manchester finally reached an agreement that was signed off on by the Manchester Select Board.
States agreement for acquisition of the common roads, water service, easements, and sewer system at Mountain View Estates.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Here it comes. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's 4-0. It's unanimous. Congratulations.
This had been a long time coming. Meanwhile, the resiliency building efforts around Green Mountain Estates aren't the only ones underway in Manchester in the wake of the July flooding. Another long-term trouble spot sits up on Rootville Road, up near the parking area for hikers who are heading up to the Prospect Rock. A culvert for a stream that crosses under the road has frequently failed, so a much bigger one, costing about $600,000, is now in place. Town Manager Scott Murphy described it for us.
Yes, we had a small, undersized culvert here before, which continually got washed out with all the heavy rains and the flooding event. So we applied to FEMA for funding, and we've got funding for this project, which was a tremendously larger project than we initially thought it was going to be. And as you can see, the size of the culvert here, that's an 8-foot deep culvert, even 5 feet showing above it. So there's 3 feet underground with various sizes of rocks and riprap underneath. And the width of the wing walls is really excessive to help stop from overflow and washing out the road. And that was one of the major problems we had before, was the road would get washed out all the time. For instance, in July 10th, that big storm we had this summer, our road crew, Jeff Williams, supervisor, was smart enough to get an excavator up above the culvert before the flooding happened. And of course, he saved the road by doing that. So it saved the town quite a bit of money. We knew this project was coming. It's just a matter of when it could be done. So we've got the financing, we got it done, and it looks great now.
Another small culvert is also being installed on Bentley Hill Road, near the town borderline with Sunderland. Building resiliency will be a long-term and more expensive route than simply building back what was before a weather event. But with climate change a fact of life, it may not only be the right way to go, but less expensive in the long run. For the GNAT-TV News Project, I'm Andrew McKeever.